Abu Hanifa did not base major rulings solely on ahad hadith unless they met strict conditions. Example, no contradiction with Qur'an, ijma or qiyas. So in other words, Abu Hanifa never accepted a hadith, a ahad hadith, unless it was in agreement. What people said, there was consensus with other scholars, or it complied with his version of what is rational or logical qiyas, allegorical, analogical. And examples of accepted hadith, the hadith of Fadak. This is an example. This Fadak hadith was rejected because it contradicted Quranic inheritance laws. Listen to this. You need to listen now. Listen up. What he's saying here is that Abu Hanifa said, I cannot accept this Fadak hadith because it contradicts the Qur'an. So, which means these other Hanbalis, they said, no, we'll accept the Fadak hadith. Never mind if it contradicts the Qur'an. We don't have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with that hadith contradicting the Qur'an. The hadith of washing feet once in wudu, okay, because it opposed mashhur, that's a less important one. Less than 100 hadiths. Now here comes the kill shot. Less than 100 ahad hadiths can be directly traced to Abu Hanifa's legal reasoning. Now if you call me a Qur'anist, then you must call Abu Hanifa a Qur'anist and a kafir also. Why? Because he refused to accept 100,000 hadiths like you do, and like your imam and like your poison priests do. And there's no way you can wiggle yourself out of this one. The Qur'an was his fundamental primary source of deducting religious laws. And he only looked at 100 ahad hadiths, which means 100 normal hadiths coming from Abu Huraira and from Muawiyah and whoever else. Then you get a Sahih hadith. He went and he immersed himself, this Al-Albani guy from Albania. And he said, right, well, that science, he got all the accolades. They gave him the license to now go and study the hadith. The man studied for 20 years. He didn't sleep. He sat in his office and he went through all hundreds of hadith books. And then he went back to Bukhari with that knowledge, the ilm al-rijal, the jarh and ta'dil, all these books of Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, all these big, heavy historical books. And he went back to Bukhari and he went back to Muslim. And this is what he found. The gold standard, this that they said is like the book after the Qur'an, the Sihah Sita. What he did was, he looked at Sahih Bukhari, and Albani generally accepted the authenticity of Sahih al-Bukhari with a few exceptions. He declared a small number, less than 10 of his hadiths, as weak or problematic. Now, if you tell me the Qur'an has 10 ayahs that are false, if you tell me the Qur'an, we have discovered 10 ayahs in the Qur'an that are false, I can tell you now, it will shake the foundations of Islam. It will shake the foundations of Islam. We pride ourselves in that we have a religion that is built on absolute surety. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is the book in which there is zero doubt. That is the standard. Zero doubt. But Bukhari is far from the only book that Muslims use. The Salafis don't use Bukhari only. They use Bukhari 5%, 10% of the time. Bukhari is not a big reference for the Salafis. They use other books, many other books, but this is the top one, the most reliable one. Then there's also the other findings, Sahih Muslim, what Albani found, similarly upheld most of Sahih Muslim, but identified 30 to 50 hadiths as weak or problematic. In other words, 50 hadiths that could be lies. Then he went to the other Sihah Sita, Sunan Abu Dawud. He reclassified a significant portion with hundreds of hadiths downgraded to da'if, which is weak. Sihah Sita, this book that you worship, Sihah Sita, hundreds downgraded. And you see, the point I want to make is this is a Salafi himself. This is a man who lived in hadith books for 20, 30 years. And he went, and they can't complain. Well, some of them are saying, no, they call him foul. They say, no, he cheated. But he is a recognized, well-entrenched, deeply immersed scholar of the Salafi literature. And he finds that most of the books in one of the Sihah Sita, most of the hadiths, he collect a significant portion. Right, not most. Tirmidhi revised many hadiths, declaring hundreds as weak. Hundreds as weak. Sunan Nasai, he reevaluated many hadiths, downgrading a notable number, notably in the hundreds. What am I saying to you? You guys want to call me a kafir for questioning hadith, for saying that the Qur'an needs the hadith. No, how do you make salah if you don't have the... You guys have a problem because your Sihah Sita, and there's more books than this. The Sihah Sita is not the only books that... These 6 are not the only books that the Salaf has based their religion on. They have 10 other books, 10, 15 other compilations. Now, if the top 6 have so many issues, what about the bottom 20? Because many of your practices of your religion are based not on these 6, but on those bottom 20. I want to raise or bring up some verses from the Qur'an, some ayat from the Qur'an that will reinforce what I've been telling you now. Let's look at some of these verses, go through them. Number 1, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذي أوحينا إليك من الكتاب هو الحق مصدقا لما بين يديه. That, listen carefully, this is the key to the point that we are making here, that I am making, that people like me are making. This is the key here. Like I say, we are grounded in the Qur'an. Surah 35, Ayah 31. وَالَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ هُوَ الْحَقُّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا. That which we divinely communicate to you from the book is the truth. Now, the Quran here, 35, 31, is telling us what is, if we ask each other, what is the truth? What is knowledge? Where do we get knowledge? Then the answer is, وَالَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ, that which is Wahi to Muhammad alayhi salam min al-kitab huwa al-haqq. That is the truth. That is knowledge. That is the source of guidance. Not that which is disseminated, that which has been recorded from Muhammad's life. Listen to this verse also. This is another verse that reinforces the central position of the Qur'an and not the central position of the hadith. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله نزل أحسن الحديث كتابا متشابها مثاني تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون ربهم. God revealed the most excellent message, a book consistent in its teachings. Unlike Bukhari, we get mistakes every now and then, 10 mistakes, or all these other books that are inconsistent. A book consistent in its teaching, offering repeat reinforcement. Instead of a once of like a hadith ahad. One hadith causes a law for all eternity, whereas the Qur'an repeats laws, offering repeated reinforcement and serving as a reminder. The skins of those who revere their Lord shiver due to it. Does our skins shiver when we read a hadith that speaks about the monkeys, didn't make salah, whatever? Do our skins shiver when we read in the hadith books about the fly in your coffee, then you must turn the fly around? Do our our skin shiver when we read that the Prophet, slept with 9 wives in one night. Those things we don't shiver. We feel angered. We feel that Islam is abused. But with the Qur'an, with this book, with the truth from Allah, our skins shiver when we hear it. Then their skins and hearts soften to God's remembrance. This is God's guidance. ذَلِكَ هُدَى اللَّهِ يَهْدِي بِهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. This is God's guidance. Not the hadith books, not the tafsir books and so on. This is God's guidance. And I think these verses make it quite clear. And then the last point is people say, but you need the hadith to tafsir the Qur'an. But then you need, again, tafsirs of the tafsir. Because do you know that there is a tafsir of Bukhari? There is a tafsir of Bukhari written by a famous Shafi'i scholar, Ibn Hajar. He wrote a tafsir of Bukhari. It was twice as long as Bukhari. Now, who's going to write a tafsir of the tafsir of Bukhari? It's a crazy idea to think that everything that is written in the past must get a tafsir. The Qur'an must get a tafsir. The Qur'an is its own tafsir.